I'm joined by leader Hakeem Jeffries. Thanks so much for taking the time.
Great to be with you.
So obviously this issue of Jeffrey Epstein has surged into the spotlight. I'm curious right now, as it seems that the Trump administration has a vested interest in not being forthright, especially as it relates to what they promised during the campaign between Alina Habba, Pam Bondi, Dan Bongino, Kash Patel, and even Trump himself. What can the Democrats do from their end, maybe in the Judiciary Committee, maybe in the Oversight Committee, to compel some information that the White House seems hell-bent on not releasing?
We are definitely going to press the case on behalf of the American people to try to figure out what Donald Trump, Pam Bondi, and that entire MAGA extremist crew are hiding from the American people. There's only two options here. Either one, Donald Trump, Bondi, and all of them lied to the American people and peddled this conspiracy theory that they knew was a lie about Jeffrey Epstein as part of some sick effort to try to motivate some people to vote for Donald Trump in 2024. That's the first option. Well, the second option is there actually is a deep state conspiracy and they're it.
Right.
And they're covering things up because of the damaging nature of the files that do exist that they have perhaps failed to disclose to the American people, notwithstanding their promise to do just that. By the way, Brian, Jeffrey Epstein died during Donald Trump's presidency the first time around.
Right.
So there's a lot of questions that actually need to be asked and answered that have been created by Donald Trump and his administration fanning the flames of this issue for the last several years. But now they're in office and they've got to be held accountable for full transparency with the American people. Jamie Raskin, the top Democrat on the Judiciary Committee, and Robert Garcia, the top Democrat on the Oversight Committee, along with Eric Swalwell and a whole host of other members of Judiciary and Oversight, are going to work hard on this issue on behalf of the American people.
So from the minority, is it true that we don't have the power to actually subpoena any of this information? But I guess it's the onus goes on to Representatives Raskin and Garcia to try to get the chairmen of their respective committees to subpoena this information from the DOJ. Is that correct?
That's correct. In the minority, temporarily, we do not have subpoena power. That power rests solely with the majority and the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, Jim Jordan, who, by the way, probably was one of the lead conspiracy theorists. I'm not familiar with exactly what he said on this, but it would be no surprise. And so we're going to continue to press the Republicans on Judiciary as well as the Republicans on the Oversight Committee. And we do have the ability to call witnesses when hearings occur relative to anything that may relate to the Department of Justice. Pam Bondi also, of course, has a responsibility, along with Kash Patel and other members of the administration, to come up to Capitol Hill and testify before the committees of jurisdiction. That also presents an opportunity for Democrats to try to get to the bottom of what's going on with this Jeffrey Epstein scandal.
So at this point, given the fact that the ball really is in the courts of these chairmen on Judiciary and Oversight, what would your message be to them in light of the fact that really the power doesn't rest with the Democrats to be able to do anything? The power rests with the Republicans to try to move this thing forward. And if they're acting in good faith, if they really care about the things that they claim to have cared about during the campaign trail, what would you say to these people now that they have the power to actually move this investigation in Congress forward?
The extreme MAGA Republican base is coming for Pam Bondi, and they will come for these chairs unless they provide some transparency. That is clear based on what we've seen over the last several days. Donald Trump and his MAGA allies spent years fanning the flames of this issue, and now chickens are coming home to roost as it relates to the accountability. Either you lied then or you're lying now.
Okay, so I want to switch gears now to what's going on in Texas, because this is another big issue where Greg Abbott has called a special legislative session, notwithstanding the fact that he called this special session while they're dealing with the fallout from this tragic flood that took place. The Republicans' focus right now is figuring out how to further gerrymander their maps. And so, per usual, Texas wasn't able to take care of its citizens, and the state legislature there, led by Greg Abbott, has decided that their main responsibility is consolidating even more power for themselves, rewarding themselves with even more seats in Congress. And so what tools are at Democrats' disposal right now to be able to neutralize what the Republicans are looking to do in Texas?
It's important to understand why this is even happening. Donald Trump is deeply unpopular. His one big ugly bill is extremely unpopular, and House Republicans have proven themselves to be nothing more than a corrupt, reckless rubber stamp for Donald Trump's extreme agenda. They have nothing to run on and no meaningful accomplishment, particularly as it relates to the core issue of lowering the high cost of living for everyday Americans, which they promised, by the way, to do on day one. Costs aren't going down, they're going up. Republicans have only a 3-seat majority in the House of Representatives. That is the narrowest majority that any party has had since the Great Depression, despite all their big talk about some huge mandate that they allegedly secured in the November election. So they are trying to rig the congressional map in Texas in a desperate attempt to try to hold on to power. The map in Texas is already gerrymandered.
Right.
And so it's unclear what advantage they actually think they can achieve. I've been in close touch with leaders down in Texas who, are prepared to do whatever is necessary to aggressively push back legislatively and to aggressively push back in terms of communicating with the people of Texas that the attention should actually be on Governor Abbott's failed response, which may have cost lives in terms of the historic and devastating floods in the Texas Hill Country. But instead of actually focusing on the health, the safety, and the well-being of the people of Texas, whose government failed them under the failed leadership of Greg Abbott, instead he calls a special session where his focus is to try to rig the congressional map. This is extraordinary stuff. It's all part of the corruption that we've seen from these extreme MAGA Republicans in terms of where their focus has been and their lack of attention on actually solving problems for everyday Americans.
There's no doubt that these leaders, at least the Democratic leaders in Texas, are going to focus their attention on the failed response to, this recent flood. But the reality is that Democrats are in the minority in Texas. And so, if a shameless Republican Party in Texas wants to move forward with this, there's not going to be much of a bulwark to prevent them from doing that. And so in terms of, you look at the map, we have a few states in this country that right now have independent redistricting commissions, for example. What would you say to the leaders in California, in New York, in New Jersey, to kind of fight fire with fire and counteract, or at least pose the threat of being able to counteract what the Republicans are looking to do in Texas?
Certainly seems to me that we can no longer be in a position where we have unilaterally disarmed as it relates to redistricting. We're all about free and fair elections and fair redistricting, which is why in the states that you just mentioned and beyond, but certainly in California, in New York, and in New Jersey, you've had either laws put on the books to allow for commission-based redistricting, or in some cases, constitutional changes, which was in fact what occurred in New York, in order to allow for the fairest redistricting possible. Now, in terms of Texas, one point that needs to be made is that the Republican speaker in the Texas House was elected with Democratic support. It's a coalition government, though, yes, Democrats are in the minority. And so I think it's going to be important for those Democrats in the Texas legislature who back the current speaker to perhaps reevaluate their support if the Republican speaker decides to go forward with a gerrymandered map designed to rig the congressional elections in the midterms in 2026. The other thing is I do think all options should be on the table as it relates to other states throughout the country so that we actually are dealing with a map where you have everyone operating from the same set of rules.
Right. So as it relates to this speaker, actually Democrats do have some leverage, because if this Texas leader relied on Democratic support to get in his position, then without that, presumably he would lose his role in the Texas legislature, probably replaced by somebody much farther right. I'm sure the choice of Donald Trump and Greg Abbott. So that is actually some good news to know that Democrats do have some leverage to be able to use there. You know, more broadly, it so often seems like when Republicans were threatening to do a winner-take-all system with the electoral vote in Nebraska, then we have Maine to use to counteract that. But it so often feels like we aren't willing to deploy any weapons until and unless the Republicans show that they're willing to do it first. And so it's always defensive. Do you think that if the Republicans do go forward with some move, some further gerrymander in Texas, that Democrats should say, okay, we're not just going to respond to what you're doing. We're not just going to try and neutralize what you're doing. We're going to go on full out offense. And we do have tools. I mean, we just spoke about the fact that we have the biggest state in the country. We have California that has an independent redistricting commission. We have New York, another huge state that has an independent redistricting commission. And so I guess my question here is would you recommend that Democrats respond with a tit for tat? Or if we see them do this, as they so often do, as we've watched them gerrymander their maps all over the country, in Ohio, in North Carolina, in Florida, and Democrats' response is so often, okay, what can we do to try to maybe just neutralize this? Should Democrats just go all-out offense to neutralize this and send a message to Republicans that it's not just going to be a tit-for-tat response, that it's going to be, if you want to engage in this, we're going to pull out the biggest weapons we have?
Yes, I think that we're in a situation right now where we have an unprecedented assault led by Donald Trump and the extremists in the House on the economy, unprecedented assault on healthcare, unprecedented assault on nutritional assistance. This one big ugly bill is a complete and total disaster in terms of ripping healthcare away from the American people, ripping nutritional assistance away from the American people, and all of it is being done to reward billionaires with massive tax breaks. It's the largest transfer of wealth from everyday Americans to billionaires in American history. This is extraordinarily destructive stuff that's being done on top of the Republican assault on the American way of life, on the rule of law, on due process, and of course on democracy itself. And so, in my view, it requires an all-hands-on-deck response. When it comes to this gerrymandering situation, understand that North Carolina already engaged in mid-decade redistricting that was egregious in the last Congress. North Carolina is a 50-50 state, right? Statewide offices held by Democrats, including the governor, the lieutenant governor, and the attorney general. And Donald Trump narrowly won the state at the presidential level. It's a 50-50 state.
Right.
And when they had fair maps, the delegation in North Carolina was 7 Democrats and 7 Republicans, as recently as January 2nd of this year, before the new Congress turned over. As a result of the maps, in terms of the mid-decade gerrymandering that was unprecedented that North Carolina Republicans did at the direction of the extremists here in Washington, they took a 50-50 delegation and they turned it into 10 Republicans and 4 Democrats. They stole 3 seats that were in Democratic hands from the people of North Carolina. And guess what? That actually is the reason they're in the majority right now.
Right.
They wouldn't even be in the majority were it not for Republicans stealing 3 seats from the people of North Carolina. And so this is a group of people where facts don't matter, hypocrisy is not a constraint to their behavior, and they actually have concluded that shamelessness is a superpower, and we have to push back aggressively using every tool available on behalf of the American people.
Perfectly put. We'll leave it there. Leader Jeffries, thanks so much for taking the time.
Thank you, my friend.